Ruben's talking about heart failure.
Yeah.
Okay, to introduce Wilfredo Pareto, he lived from 15th of July 1848 to 1923. He was an engineer, sociologist, economist, and philosopher. And he's recognized by his contribution to the study of income and individuals' choices. He was inspired by Adam Smith, not inspired Adam Smith.
A little bit
Adam
afterwards.
Smith came before him.
I
And he developed microeconomics, which we are studying this year. And of course, he's very famous for the Pareto optimality and Pareto distribution. And one thing that is very interesting about him is his idea of social arrow, which is really his version of social pyramid. It's basically just a social pyramid, which he said, very fat on the bottom. Maybe I should just draw it.
Yes.
Very good.
Yeah, and very fat on the bottom. There's a mass of men live, and very thin at the top where the wealthy people sit. So it's basically his idea of social pyramid, which we know.
The 80-20 idea, right?
Yeah, and then he's really famous for the idea 80-20 rule, which is basically saying that 80% of the land in Italy was owned by 20% of the population. That is, so to say, the wealthy people had wealthy people were very little in comparison to the amount of land. So very little wealthy people owned the majority.
Yeah, so he also calls it the law of the vital few. He first recognized it when he was in his garden. He watched, he looked at his pea pods. He saw 20% of them contained 80% of the peas. This idea also came up in 1992 when the United Nations made a protocol based on the income distribution among the worldwide population, and they saw that the 20% of the population in the world owned 82% of the income. Also, recently Microsoft reported that if you fix the top 20% of the bugs reported in the software, it fixes 80% of the crashes. But I don't think it ever does that, so that's why the system crashes 80% of the time.
Nice.
So yeah, that's the
Sponsored by Mac.
Yeah. That's the 80-20 rule.
Yep. Pareto distribution is basically what he came up with. On the bottom, it's basically population, and on the y-axis, it's basically the income. So what he did was he collected all the data from tax, from Switzerland, Germany, Italy, and so on, and he plotted this graph, income versus population graph, and then surprisingly, all the graphs looked very similar, which was this power distribution thing. And his direct words were, at the bottom of the wealth curve, men and women starve and children die young, so at the bottom, where the majority are. And then in the broad middle of the curve, all is turmoil and motion, so turmoil and motion. And then climbing, and at the very top sits the elite of the elite, who controls wealth and power for a time, until they are unseated through revolution or upheaval by a new aristocratic class. And he was very pessimistic about human beings in general. He said there is no progress in human history. Yeah. And that goes to, and that drives us to the idea of Pareto optimality. It's basically when the market is equilibrium, there are no externalities, and the marginal social cost and marginal social benefit are equal to each other, and that's when the social welfare is to its maximum, where the community surplus, which consists of consumer surplus and producer surplus, are maximized.
Excellent.
So yeah, his results.